Williams says, "Who knew that a book about murder, grief, and disintegrated families could be so funny?" So with that intriguing line, I will pass over to Tara. But here as well, if you have any questions, obviously with the heat this morning, be more water, please help yourself during your time on the back table. Thank you.
So just to begin off today, I wanted to read from the first chapter, and then I'll go into a bit of a discussion about the writing of the book and the research and everything that was involved. Daff heard her heart like a gunshot, click, crack, boom. Typical cop's daughter. She wasn't raised on sentimental bush poetry, read aloud while the family picnicked together on warm summer days. She was shown how to kick a guy in the nuts, scream like thunder, call 000, and hide under the bed. When she was a kid, there'd been weeks when her father couldn't kiss her goodnight because some junkie had stabbed him with a needle and the test results weren't back yet. So when Daff looked at Tom, she didn't hear lub-dub, blood-dug. She heard click, crack, boom, which made sense. He was a cop too. So I think for that reason, it was quite easy to give up the story about those two boys because I guess I had the mindset of it was just a starting point, and I was totally okay with it being messy and to give it up. And I still feel like writing is just a complete mess all the time. Yeah. And then you're just constantly tidying it up, and then yeah.
No worries. Do we have any other questions?
So when you got to the end, congratulations. When you got to the end, what was your publishing journey? What journey did you take?
Yeah, absolutely. So when the book was pretty well done, I wanted to self-publish it, but I did try to go the traditional route, as quite a few people who were professionals that I'd hired really recommended that I do that. So I thought, well, I'll give it a chop. And I did come close to a traditional deal twice, but I am now glad that they fell through because one company closed about 6 months after. And the other company, the reason why they turned it down was my book was actually weirdly similar to a book they had published the year before. It was quite the premises of both books are really similar, but when you read them, the voice is totally different, because the other one was written by a man and it had a much more dark and demonic sort of thing going on in it, but because the surface level premise was so similar, they just didn't want to go there. But I did decide to self-publish it in the end, and I went through Ingram Spark. And so they're sort of taking over now from Amazon, and they do all the distribution to all of the online, every online retailer. But you can even still order it through libraries because they hook up with all of those systems as well. So it's actually super easy now to do all of that. But I knew that I wanted to make the book as good as a traditional book. So I paid for an editor, a proofreader, I got a cover done, and I got someone to do the interior formatting, which if you're going to self-publish, pay someone to do the interior formatting, because that, I can't, I'd rather pluck my eyeballs out than do that. Sitting there trying to fix and format everything would be a complete nightmare. I don't have the patience for that. But some of the feedback I have gotten from people who have read it, and these are total strangers, they don't have to say anything nice about me, that they were really impressed with the quality, especially even of the print book, the quality of the front cover and the pages itself, the paper quality. And then a few people have said that the story itself they were impressed by, because there's so many people in self-publishing who are doing the rapid release model of writing a novel in a month and then publishing it. So that has been really nice to hear that people have read it and been impressed by the fact that it was self-published and that it was of a certain standard. So yeah, that's sort of been the publishing journey.
Novel, you'll take a similar approach to just kind of see where it takes you, or do you think you'll be a little bit more structured in how you're going to approach it?
Well, I'm writing another novel now as part of my doctorate, and I was fully I'm not going to pants it, I'm fully going to plot it, and it's going to be so efficient. I'm just going to be a robot with this novel, and I'm going to pump it out in a year. It's going to be great. And I started writing it, and then it's dead. I wrote the outline, and then I started writing the novel following the outline, and it was just snore fest. So I think that's the thing where you've got to accept your own process, and now this novel has again become a mess. And but it's a mess that feels like it's going somewhere, whereas the other one that felt really efficient, the one that was following the outline, it basically felt like I was just describing characters walking through their day, and there was no tension and there was no sense of narrative drive or anything like that. And I do wonder if that's maybe because you as the writer have to be surprised when you're writing. Because if you're surprised, then the reader's going to be surprised. But yeah, so I was so hopeful that the second novel would be a different experience, because now I know how to do stuff. But apparently I don't. So yeah, it's just a mess again.
You do, you know how to do it your way.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly.
Can it be a sequel? 'Cause I feel
Yeah,
like they
there
could
is.
be.
Yeah. It's I don't know if other people are like that, but I've been hearing the snippets of conversations between people in my head of some things that would work really well for a second book. There's one big element I would need to work out first, I think, before I started writing it. But yeah, I definitely have an idea for a sequel. Yeah. I don't feel like that story's over yet. Yeah, which is why the ending is a bit open here. Yeah.
Oh, I was wondering, did you find some characters easier to relate to or easier to write than others?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd say probably Daff and Detective Lawrence were the easiest. I think it's that thing like, I don't know if you like this, Emily, where every character is a little bit like you, but they're maybe an exaggerated component of your personality. Like, I think there's maybe only one character in there who's like just complete opposite to me. But that's what I felt like, especially with Daff and Detective Lawrence. I felt like Daff was maybe the really cynical side of me, but then maybe Detective Lawrence is like that dry, daggy side of me. But so I felt like their voices came the easiest, and I always found, because I alternate between those two voices chapter to chapter, and I'd find that when I'd finish Daff's chapter and I'd have to go into Lawrence, I would be like, no, I'm not ready to leave that voice yet, and then the same would happen with Lawrence. I think the hardest person to find a voice for was Liam, because he has no memory, and how do you create a personality from someone who doesn't know who they are? So then that was probably the most difficult one. Yeah.
I have a question in the meantime, and it's sort of a two-part question, but it will segue one into the other. First of all, what do you use any particular writing software other than Word, or have you tried anything like Scrivener? And with your writing, did you write chronologically? Like you mentioned, flipping between the voices. I was wondering if you wrote the parallel storylines, in character order or in, chronological order.
Yeah.
And yeah, what was the most challenging part about the actual writing?
I tried to use Scrivener probably 7 or 8 years ago. I was laughing with Morgan before, because when I was first learning how to write, Morgan was like, write a Mills and Boon, like you get paid 10 grand. I was like, all right. So I downloaded Scrivener, and I had an attempt at that, completely tanked. Not built to write romance, I don't think. But I tried Scrivener, and I've never gone back to it. Now I just write Word.
Yeah.
But to make it easier, so you don't have like an 85,000 word document, I broke it into like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Just so it was like a little bit more digestible, easier to find stuff. But when I was writing, I was quite mindful to write, like I wrote Daff's chapter and then Lawrence, then Daff and Lawrence in the timeline order. That was sort of what the early drafts were like, and then I had a bit of a play with structure where I moved things around, but it made it too confusing because there was already too much mystery going on, and it was like an unnecessary, like, it was just like an unnecessary addition to the book. It didn't add anything to it. So then I ended up moving that middle section, because initially I wanted you to like not know that Tom had died, and then so you didn't find out till the middle of the book.
Oh wow, that
And then
changed it.
yeah, completely changed it. But then it was like there was just way too much mystery, because the first half of the book initially you didn't know what was wrong with Daff, and then you find out halfway through, and it was just like it was way too hard because you couldn't connect to her. So then I moved that to chapter 1, and then the biggest reason why I also had to write in chronological order is one of the best pieces of advice I got off a mentor through the master's program. I worked with Kate Goldsworthy, who's an editor, and she said, you know, sit down, pull apart the draft, and then write a timeline of the events and when everything happens. And that was the most useful piece of advice I got about writing a novel, because prior to that, like, there were just like these little plot holes everywhere where timelines weren't adding up and stuff. So once I had that timeline then created, then it was like just polishing the chronological order of things and just tweaking and tightening it. But yeah, from the beginning I wrote in chronological order, but I totally get that there are authors that just follow, like, they're excited to write a particular scene, so then they'll write that and then they just stitch things together after. And yeah, I definitely didn't work that way, because I was...
It was just initially that first scene that you like dropped the groceries for, I've got to write this.
Yeah, big time. And then worked backwards from there, worked up to that scene, and then it was actually quite interesting because that scene was the pivotal scene I was working towards, but then it was interesting because when I was actually doing the writing, a new scene came in, and then that was actually the pivot point. And then, so then it was quite interesting that once you work towards it, then the natural next thing that seems logical happened, and then it changed the climax of the book and stuff. So yeah.
Well, we look forward to reading this, and for those who have read it as well. I'm about to dash and grab my copy to get signed, but if we could all please congratulate and give a big round of applause to